Für die nur Deutsch sprechen. My name is Ali Jamalian. I'm the founder of Sunset Connect. San Francisco is #1 manufacturing and distribution. We also cultivate flowers and have been in this business for about 20 years. I was arrested by the federal government in '99, which then positioned me now to be the social equity commissioner in San Francisco, which allowed us to pull licenses for those who had been disadvantaged by the war on drugs. You might know some of our strains like Lamb's Breath, Sunset Sherbet. Those are some of the strains that we are behind, so that earned me the honor to be here today and to moderate the panel with a group of very, very knowledgeable growers and cannabis folks. So
that moved far away from you.
I don't know why you guys went so far.
It's very scary.
It smells good? Oh, you got the mic, all right. So that being said, I'd like to start the panel. We have one question that we kind of like to use as an icebreaker, which is where the panel sees international cannabis going in the next few years. And with that, I'll pass it to Travis.
Thank you very much, Ali. International cannabis, as we've all heard throughout this time here, is really headed to where can we learn from the places that have already done this, right? And I think it's very interesting I equate it to a match. Every single state that we've looked at in the past is a match that takes a while to get started, but once it does, it burns really, really bright for a period of time. Let's call it 3 years. And every single person who gets into it, frankly, is going to make money for a period of time, and then it's going to burn and simmer down. And those who came into it with the right headspace and really doubled down and really focused on systems and process, right? And optimizing cultivation. Those are the ones who, in the long term, are going to make it past the ember. And we've seen this in every single state where they burn bright and then they kind of dissipated. The ones who make it all the way to the end will be the ones that are around for a lifetime. So that's my point of view.
Thanks, Travis. I think to add to that, the international scene is not unified yet. You don't really have legislation that is overarching, where Germany can do easily business with the US. For us, coming from the US side of things, exporting California or Colorado buds to Germany is very, very far away on our legislative map, if I would say, like 5 to 10 years maybe, something like that. So I think it kind of depends what countries do individual trade deals with each other, and that will then kind of lead to an international umbrella of companies. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to start looking at how you want to play in this market. So if you're going to be somebody that's going to be a large grower and you're going to make a single product that is going to be very good, I always equate it to like the brewery industry. If you're going to be a logger, be the logger, make the same thing, get big at that, and make a lot of it. Or if you want to be a craft brewer, which is more of your craft mentality, there's still a good market. There's still a good market in the United States for that too. You have to be able to be very innovative. You have to have the right brands. You have to go back and just very similar and touch people that are in your area. Very similar to a craft brewer. And then the third market, or third place to really play at is more nutraceutical, pharmaceutical products. So there's a huge amount of opportunities within this plant. There's over 120 different cannabinoids. You've got over 400 different terpenes. There's a lot of different things you can do. Find what really makes the niche that you can get into a supplement or pharmaceutical. Find the right partners. And I would also say, you find people like the people on this group and start learning from them and figure out what are you good at, what do you want to do, and start playing in that space.
Yeah, I think that's actually the most important part, to your point. The cannabis supply chain, from cultivation to what it becomes when you're purchasing it in a store, whether that's a hash, an edible, a pre-roll, a flower, a tincture, every one of those is produced and processed by somebody who specializes in that particular discipline. So, and to add to your point, we're a very small San Francisco brand. If you smoke cannabis in San Francisco, there's a likeliness you smoked some of our stuff. Outside of San Francisco, probably just, maybe a few miles here and there, because we're really hyper-local. We focus on what the San Francisco smoker wants, and that's very high potency. So everything that we grow, everything that we make really caters to a high potency,
Where I think what you'll see in Europe, because it's more of a novice market, and you have a lot of the so-called canna curious, that you will probably, to his point, kind of be very successful with nutraceuticals, with more approachable potencies that are in the 18 to the 20% range. So I think Europe will kind of find its own way and its own preferences in cultivation as the years go on. I think Alex can probably speak a lot to the terpene profiles that Europeans enjoy.
When it comes to, well, we in Europe, we like a lot, is of course when it comes to the aromas, that we enjoy the aromas a lot. The more cured they are, the more we're liking them. Actually, that is to this.
And Timo, what do you see as one of the biggest light suppliers to cultivators? I'm sure you've seen plenty of really state-of-the-art facilities. What do you see the strain profiles that are being run here? And I'm sure you also know what we run in California, so you have a pretty good idea of what the taste in Europe is versus US.
Yeah, the question is, do we know the taste of Europe, right? So Europe is huge, it's a continent, and consumers are very, very different, and with more choices, also their taste will develop. Right now, there are areas where there have not these choices now, so still taste and demand needs to still be developed. But I think it was a great discussion at the beginning when you said something about focus. We learned from other markets that a lot of companies try to be everywhere, and that really, I mean everywhere at the same time, and then totally vertically integrated. From I do my own genetics until extraction, my own brand, distribution, and so on. This is for every business, independent from cannabis. So complex, so I think focus is important. Where is your play in the value chain? And then also what Nick Easley said earlier, don't develop your own lights, don't develop your own racks, don't pick the things which work, because then you can forecast and make a business model and a business case which is fulfilling the customer demand. What you said, what is my business model, who do I want to supply to? And I think this is it's interesting because we see all this right now developing into different countries in Europe. And it's exciting times, but for entrepreneurs, the challenge is these times are totally unclear. When is regulation coming here? When is happening that? And having the agility in the business model to adapt is, I think, very interesting to see who will then be successful, because I think it will be the ones who are able to adopt the business model fast.
Yeah, I think that's really on point. And to add to that, the key thing there is pick your area of expertise, whether it's cultivation, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's packaging. If you try to own them all, you'll be a master of none. And what we really see from working based out of California and working in the vertical growing space with many cultivators who have been successful is the ones who have really excelled. Companies like Curaleaf, Verano, Nature's Medicine, Steezy, they've really focused on what they're good at, and they didn't try to make everything themselves. Like, to your point, making your own lights or racks, yeah, you could go that route, but you could be better off focusing on your own systems and process to be first in that given field.
Yeah, and also that I see it in our own company. We did a lot of cannabis lighting, and then we decided, let's go also to Europe, and let's go do also much more in food crops, and the complexity was like boom. So it's not like I experience it every day in our own company how hard it is. So focus is really for us as well, because it's immediately you need to put new people, new skill sets in the company, and then it gets really difficult to scale and keep the focus.
Yeah, and if you add to that when you're in a new cannabis market like Germany, or even markets that legalize in the U.S., the states that do, if you do, let's say, a processing place where you're just processing oils or making white label stuff, that will already generate you a decent amount of business, because to his point, there is going to be a lot of growers that don't manufacture themselves. They're focused on cultivating. and they don't have brands, so they want somebody to buy their bulk flower, process that into products. So there is opportunities to start facilities and just make money on the square footage of that facility, even if you don't have a brand. But to Timo's point, you have to focus on one thing you're good at. Are you going to make creams and nutraceuticals? Are you going to do pre-roll joints? But if you become good at one thing, your facility will generate revenue.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I'd still equate it back to, any kind of craft industry. So there's 1,500 different varieties or strains out there. If you try to do all 1,500, you probably won't get the customer base that you want. So your customers are going to be, after a while, they're going to like, hey, you make the best whatever. So if it's a craft brewer, you might say it's an imperial stout, and this might be a train wreck. But these are the guys I always go to. I get the best train wreck. I get my best feeling from that. That's where I go to. They're my guy, and I'm willing to drive by 5 other dispensaries to get to them because that's my guy. Because what's going to happen is there'll be additional dispensaries, and the people that really are not connected with you are going to go to the closest dispensary, and that's what you want to avoid.
I think another question that was asked was if what we see happening to the race to the bottom when it comes to potency, basically THC per milligram, whether it's going to become sort of a brand war to sell you the most THC per gram for the best price. And I think that's something that the whole panel can speak to. I'll start with Travis if you want to start that one. We've seen it in California, so I think you have a little bit of experience already.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's besides like from the brand standpoint, right? There's a few brands that have really done it pretty well, and I think that they're doing all right in the whole vertical chain, but they have experts who they brought in for each thing. They didn't just try to figure it out themselves, because going back to that point. But I think the race to the bottom is really going to come to who. If you look at the price per pound in California, it went from 2,000 to 800, right? And if you're producing pounds at 800 the whole time, in the beginning you thought you were making a ton of money, and then all of a sudden you can barely keep the doors open. So I think if you look at it from day one, from a cultivation standpoint, how do I optimize for as cheap as I can make it for at still holding the quality level that is important to you and your customer, whether that's, to your point, the highest THC or the smoothest for the entry-level cannabis curious consumer. How do I get to that $400 price point per pound to grow, so that when I'm making 2,000, I'm making even more, and I can turn that money and reinvest into my business. But when it gets down to 800, I'm still profitable. So process in any business that you look at, we fly planes and, knock on wood, don't crash very often because we follow processes. That's a very long-standing industry. We have to get to that point to where everybody's following the same type of processes internally. At GrowGlide, we looked at that from a systems standpoint with a cultivation kind of task overview and some educational components that we're working on internally. But that's where I see as a key thing is don't focus on how much money you're making now, focus on where's it going to be in 5 years and optimize for that day.
Yeah, I totally agreed on processes. At my manufacturing, we've implemented Flourish, which is a compliance and ERP software, and that even captures our cost of goods on latex gloves or whatever. But what that's done for us, it's increased our output by 30% while dropping our cost of goods like 7%. But you also see what kind of wastage you have once you have systems in place that actually track this. So one tip that I have for people that are starting a cultivation is, first of all, look at the time of the growth period of your strains. If you're running a 12-week strain, that is an extra month of rent you have to pay where you're not generating revenue. So always keep a good mix of 12, 8, and 10-week strains so that you're always harvesting and always generating revenue. So staggering your grow is something that's really, really important. And the other thing is really look to have, to Stuart's point, the flavor profile. Maybe it's not a super high potency one, but it has a really unique taste that people really want. So there's ways to manipulate your catalog to also be profitable, not just for the love of, I want to grow this 12-week strain. So you have to pick them well.
If I may add, so to the question of the race to the bottom, if we see the sales price, there will be craft brewers, there will be different business models you can play and maybe also sell premium, but the big volume will be get under a lot of pressure. It will happen, it's an agricultural product, it gets commoditized, and it gets, so pressure will happen as it did for tomatoes, as it did for corn, and whatever. So it's, I think, having the operational spendings under control, and the two biggest blocks of your operational spendings, if it's a greenhouse or indoor facility, will be labor and electricity. And labor comes down to processes, procedures, and so on, being effectively. You know, I always like also the example of if I go into a Dutch greenhouse, it's beautiful, right? It runs like a perfect machine, and 10, 20 years ago they produced, for now the example of tomatoes, 80 kilograms, 40 kilograms, and now 20 years later it's 80. So they could increase the production by 100%, and they thought back then they already had it totally under control, right? So where I want to go with that is if the prices drop, sales prices drop, then you need to preserve your gross margin by having your OPEX under control, and that is electricity and this is labor. And these two things is important, and if we now go back to the example in California, the prices drop, and everyone who didn't have the OPEX under control, having, for example, HBS lines, then you have no operational income anymore, no gross profit, and then you cannot survive, right? And to the point with the matches, I really like this. We cannot afford in Europe, really. I don't want that all the matches burn through the end, because we have the opportunity to take learnings from other markets and do it right. So it's all collectively our responsibility to not repeat, because actually we saw it already, so let's make it better.
I think it's important to add, though, that in the US there was always a lot of 30, 40-year-old existing industry that had a say in what we had to do. So you do have a clean canvas, and it is really nice to have a clean canvas, and we do hope that Germany takes from all the different states that legalized and grabs the best of it. That's definitely the hope. And I think Stuart had something.
Yeah, so I 100% agree with what you're saying. So you have to run it like a real business. It's not, you're not just going to go, hey, I'm in the weed business and I'm going to get rich. It doesn't really work that way. You have to work hard, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. So certainly, labor, electricity. You're going to look at a return on investment. You've had financial model people talk to you earlier. You may have the cheapest operation, but if you're not getting yield, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So you're going to say, I'm going to pay X amount to be able to get X amount of yield. And whatever that number is also depends on what you want to grow. So product selection is extremely important. Branding, you're going to have to brand. So you look at the companies, there are plenty of companies out there that are commodities. Look at bananas. Anybody hear of Chiquita bananas? Probably everyone, right? Because why? Because they branded their product. It just doesn't call it bananas, and I'm a commodity. And they demand more money for that. And so you got to get into the branding discussion. And then there's a matter of innovations. And innovations certainly have a THC, but then you're going to add in terpenes. And terpenes to me are extremely important. I'm going to let Alex talk to that.
Yeah, but I have nothing to add for the terpenes at a second. What I'd like to say is that we see here in Europe, when it comes to the CBD business at the end, a good example of how it can go down and how you can lose your money for all your investment. Because a few years ago, the price of the kilo price was still 4,000 euro. And now you can buy it for 200 euro the kilo. So you can see that even the investments back for indoor facilities for CBD flowers have been made in millions and millions and millions. The ROE nowadays is not given anymore because the price has been dropped so much because everybody started it. And without giving any regulation for nothing at the end, everybody's just winging it, trying to bring the biggest proposal, trying to bring the biggest consultants, trying to bring the biggest investors, trying to build the biggest facilities, and at the end you have bad outcomes, the prices are dropping, it's too much, and you will never get the investment back at the end.
So let us try to make it concrete. How if we would have a magic wand and could say, okay, how it should be in Germany, to not repeat the question, how would we build it? Let's discuss this. Because I get asked, Timo, would you limit the amount of licenses in Germany? So then, to produce. So then the first question, okay, do we produce only in Germany, or can we get also import? So let us discuss what do we think should Germany, it's a huge country, over 80 million people, should they supply their own cannabis or should they allow as well import? What do you guys think about that?
I think I'd like to kind of take the lead on that, being that I still touch the plant every day, and I've been cultivating it for 20 years. So I do take a little issue with saying that it's a commodity. It's a part of it is commoditized, but when people spend 50, 60 euros on 5 grams of weed, that's a really nice wine bottle that you could afford for that price. And grapes may be a commodity, but wine is not. So I think we really need to differentiate. And when we grow hemp, we can grow hemp like we grow corn. We can't grow cannabis like we grow corn. Cannabis, the footprint of an individual plant, takes space, you need to care for it, you need to prune it. It gets a different regimen of food every week, of fertilizers, it gets enzymes. So there's a lot of work that goes into creating really good cannabis, right? So while it gets commoditized on like an outdoor, we see the commoditization in California of outdoor weed, we don't see that on indoor as much. While the price has dropped, there's still a strong market for it. So I think to transition to your point of what to do in Germany, I think, yes, the wheat should be grown locally that's sold in Germany, so you can foster small business, so you can give outdoor farmers the chance to grow a commodity, but you give indoor farmers a chance to be craft brewers. And I think that's aligned with the German culture as well.
But would you do it only in Germany for Germany?
I'm for export, but what I'm saying, the first right of refusal, the first right to grow cannabis should be given to the locals. But they should also be allowed to export it, sure.
I mean, I think you're having a problem. I 100% agree with what you're both saying. I think you're gonna have a problem on day one is that demand is going to greatly outpace supply, right? So what's best for the transition period is likely gonna be something where you have to allow, let's say 50% to be imported on year one, and then you could trail that down, then 40%, and then 30, 10, 20, all the way down to 10. I don't know that I would necessarily agree that it should be zero is allowed from import, but something along a transition period. Otherwise, you're just gonna have 10x the demand. And if you say there's no legal import, it's going to come in through the black market, right?
So I don't disagree with that. You need a transitional strategy, sure.
Yeah, and I think the way that to your point, I 100% agree. I love the brewery analogy. There's in America, there's the Budweiser, there's the Coors. There's only a couple of those guys, but to equate that's your outdoor grow. Quality is going to be low, it's going to be inexpensive, but there are hundreds or thousands even of flourishing microbreweries and craft breweries who are looking at growing their indoor space, and they're not trying to sell to the world, they're trying to sell to San Francisco, right? And they're putting out an amazing product. And I think that's why when you go back to that operational efficiency, for us at GrowGlide, multi-tier growing is crucial. And if you look at that from an OpEx standpoint, your first tier is going to cover your labor costs, your second tier covers your rent, and your third tier is your pure profit. And that's really how a lot of people are transitioning to. They learn how to grow in a single tier or outdoor, but the ones who quickly transition to a multi-tiered, very process-driven environment are the ones who are winning now. So Europe can really look ahead and say, let's skip the wasted time. To your point, power and space is really expensive. And we talked about earlier in the green room the cost of transportation and supply chain. To your point, cannabis is really old by the time it goes from Canada to here or wherever, and that's not really helping the quality and consistency. Versus if we can grow it inside of Berlin, for instance, and supply just Berlin, that's going to save on a lot of things, including benefits for the environment.
And I think it's important to say, to your point, that a Budweiser and a craft brewer can live next to each other and both have a market. The big brands attract attention, they attract awareness, they bring in a ticket price that's affordable across all tax brackets, and then you have your little nice gems that you can pick from. I think it should be driven by getting the consumers the freshest, best product, whether that's from a commercial industrial outfit or from a craft outfit.
Yeah, completely agree. And certainly I've been on both sides of that with Curaleaf and small craft brewers that are craft cannabis guys that we work with today with AgriPi. And it's really they work together, but a large Curaleaf are large, and you have like 3 large ones within Germany. Those folks will help push regulations. Those folks will bring and drive process improvements. Those folks will bring in product safety standards. And instead of having all these little guys trying to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, let the big guys do that. Let them pave that way. And don't try to compete with it. You don't need to compete with it. Unless you're the guy that runs around here with $2 or $3 billion, and I'm guessing none of those people are in this room. And you're going to go like, how do I get to the craft side? So, back to Travis' point, if you do vertical grows, you can do, they're a 4x8 section. That's one strain. So you can do multiple strains within your facility, which you can keep on getting your customers more and more aware to new things. So craft brew and large brewery is a very good analogy, and that's what I would look at. And as far as licenses, as far as limiting, I wouldn't limit any licenses. And I know that's not necessarily popular, but I would limit the licenses based on you have to hit a product safety and product quality standard. That should be your only limitation.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's also important to say that craft and commercial, we actually all use the very similar equipment. So for you, when you walk into industrial grow, or you walk into my 200 lighters, it's both Fluence. So it's something that we all do use the same equipment. It's really just the intent with which you approach your cultivation.
Not all, unfortunately, but we try our best. But what I heard, what we are all saying, and I agree, I would give license to growers in Germany, for Germany, because you can create value propositions and branding. Here the Brandenburg or Berlin, Kasch or whatever, you can make a nice strain and you can label it, and people want that. They want to be associated with their community or region. I see that, but I totally agree, we need to enable and have in Germany import, because we need so much weed, unbelievable, to fight the black market. And where I'm from in Bavaria, a lot of people are buying cannabis through the darknet, and they are very well educated consumers, because if you go into the darknet, it looks like an Amazon store where you have all the references and all the customer reviews and so on. So there must be volume and choice, because otherwise you just decriminalize the drug, everyone is still going to the dealer, and we don't achieve the goals what the German government wants to protect minors, to get tax income, to ensure product quality and safety. These are the 3 main targets for the government. This you don't have if you don't have enough weed and everyone is just buying it more or less decriminalized from the dealer. So I think we need to have enough, and I really like this transition process of maybe phasing it slowly out, to support German cultivators. But we also need to be clear on electricity in Germany is ridiculous expensive, and this country is pretty crowded already. It's a tiny country with 80 million people, so also permits and growing facilities to build them up is expensive in Germany. So I just hope if Germany gives regulation that it's long term, because if you cannot make your money in 3, 4, 5, 6 years, but they change all of a sudden and you compete all of a sudden with cheaper cultivators with cheaper prices, then their business model is broken again.
Well, one thing I can assure you that's happened in every other state and country that did legalize cannabis is that you're nowhere looking at near the final legislation. It is that I will put money on that. The other thing I do want to mention is, to your point with the black market, one thing that I really feel like is lacking in the German legislation is in incentivizing people that have had a record for selling cannabis and give them a path to a legal industry. And there's no program for it, they're not considering it in their laws, and it's not fair towards those that risk their freedom to make something socially acceptable, but it's also counterproductive to your goal of wanting to eliminate the black market. I would take every kid that's selling 8s on a corner and give him a bud tender education, because that kid, to your point, will be a knowledgeable salesperson. So I do miss the restorative and the social equity justice component in the legislation that Germany is drafting, and I wish they would put more effort into that.
But do we know that still? I don't think that we know how they will change the BTMG law, because they need to, if you legalize recreational cannabis, you need to also change how right now consuming cannabis is punished. So this I personally have no view into, but they will need to change it because otherwise we have conflicting laws actually.
But what I'm saying is the people of the past that have been convicted, they need to be incentivized, or the people that are right now still dealing in the illegal market. You incentivize those people. Look, I was one of those. And the city incentivized me to come out of all my basement, out of the back of the restaurant that I was
Get a free record. Yeah.
and they gave me a priority permit. What did that do? I invested $2.5 million into building a business in the city. So you have to incentivize those to come out of the underground, and then you end up being the chair of the oversight committee, and you have a voice, and you have a voice for people that didn't have a voice before, but we're also one of the best manufacturers. Our joints are the #1 selling joints because we really love what we do, right? We risked our lives for it. So I just think the people that have had convictions should have an opportunity. Now that everybody says, hey, it's okay to smoke weed, why don't they get an opportunity, a first shot at the industry? Do you have any more comments? Because I think we were going to open up some public questions too.
What I wanted to add to Timo before was that why also a big reason why you have people more turn to black market, and then the black market educate you better than any pharmacist. Just actually where you can get information, or I can get any kind of knowledge about what you would be growing, how the plant would be for you, what kind of benefits you could have. And if you go to the pharmacy, it will look at you like, it could be this, I don't know.
You're absolutely right, and that is why in Germany it's so interesting how the point of sale looks like. You know, if we would know how the point of sale looks like, we can also imagine how much they can sell and what, and who is selling it, and how much this person knows to educate. So this is like one of the questions, which is, yeah, and you're right. We hope for people who are in the cannabis industry today, being the people telling possible consumers what benefits they have, because in most cases they know it better than a pharmacist. I have nothing against pharmacists, that's not the point, but they have not been part of the industry so far, so there's also a learning curve to take.
Yeah, I think the other part is it's the black market's there. It's not like if we act like we're going to legalize it and then there's going to be weed. The weed is already there. People have been doing it for a long time, and all you have to do is basically say, now you can do it the right way. Instead of all the other stuff that goes on, just take the people that already know how to do this business and give them a license, provided that they have to meet certain regulations, for sure, without a doubt. We don't want to hurt anybody. But just give the people that know how to do this the chance to do it.
Yeah, there's no bigger incentive than not going to jail. It's a great incentive. Huge incentive. I think we should start with some questions from the audience, if you guys have any.
Everything clear?
No questions at all. Oh, over there.
Straight to smoke session.
While we're getting him a mic, I think
Let's hurry to lunch.
while we're waiting for him to get a mic, I think everything we said about the eradicating or getting towards a reduction in the black market is crucial. The one big caveat there is going to be the distribution, right? If it's 6 p.m. on a Friday and you and your friends want to get some good quality, if you have to drive 25 miles. Even if you're like, I'm trying to support the legal market, you're like, I'm just going to call my dealer, right? So there needs to be that distribution market. Maybe Amazon one day gets into drone deliveries and.
But I agree. I
solves the
think
problem.
access is I was asked in San Francisco why we don't put a cap on retail licenses, and I said, well, everybody should be able to walk to a dispensary within 10 minutes. So until we have 3 or 4 in every neighborhood that's accessible, we don't have enough, because look at how many liquor stores, look how many Spätis we have in Berlin, right? So why not? We need access everywhere. Like to your point, shouldn't take you more than 3 blocks to find a weed shop.
Yeah, but I guess with all the global services and everything, you just order it on Just Eat in a few years and it will deliver it home anyway with convenience.
Yeah, like we have Ease and stuff, they deliver. It's convenient.
So the question is, we're talking about illicit versus legal market, and one category that feels completely not talked about but widely used in Germany is hashish. So I'm curious to hear what, if any, opinion you all have about hashish and how that will or could fit into this, new world.
That's right in my wheelhouse. So we're the biggest hash maker in San Francisco and have won just several awards this month for our temple balls. Hashish is so culturally ingrained here in Germany that I think what you'll see is an explosion in the market of rosins, terp sauces, diamonds, traditional hash, temple balls. You'll see less and less of the so-called shoe hash, kind of the flattened hash, the way it gets here right now. But we see in California, for example, that hash is exploding. So this 7/10 is, the official hash holiday. So 7/10 hash sales went up 70%. And then they've kind of flattened out, but they're overall up now 30% to what they were before. We see an incredible explosion in hash. I think, to go back to the point, if I was making hash here, I would definitely look into some, local ethnicities and cultures that have that ingrained. I bet you I could find a hell of a Lebanese hash maker here. So I think hash will be a part where Germany can really dominate some of the markets.
But it will be so hard to push away the illegal market. It's like, I cannot even imagine it. So what we feel about hashish, we love it. And we get great hashish from Morocco, from Lebanese, from Afghanistan. And they do it in massive fields and do amazing hashish. It will be brutally difficult to push this away for a good price point because the quality is good. But here, the politicians have an interest because this is a product where potentially the quality could be somehow changed because you can mix easier stuff in there than on the flour. So there's a big interest to push away the illegal market, but it will be tough, I think. It will be very, very tough to push it away. But who can and finds the sweet spot? Yeah, there are a lot of consumer wants that for sure.
And I think once you see a tested product with a lab test, and then you see one that's not tested and you see what they test for, you're probably going to go with the tested product. And to his point, yes, they make good landrace techniques, but you're not going to get a butter or a rosin that's like bright yellow or white from them, right? You're not going to get a sauce that pulls a spaghetti into your dab rig. So yeah, you'll have your choices, but he's right. You're spoiled with really good street hash here. That is an issue, but it's also often contaminated.
That is the issue, but who's not saying that maybe Morocco is changing the laws? It's a sleeping giant who could also change the law, and if Germany have a bilateral agreement with Morocco, it could be also that then it get imported. It's not something which is not potentially possible, right?
A real optimist, this one.
I would have said in a real bright future, maybe we have the cultivation licenses in Morocco and we can export and import the actual real hashish, but legal this time from Morocco, and we can serve it everywhere.
There you go. Let's keep on dreaming.
Does that answer your question a little bit? Do we have any other questions?
All right, let's hear it for the panel.
All right, thank you.